As whitetail deer hunters, our favorite time of the year is now upon us, the whitetail rut. It seems like every year we wait and wait and wait for this time to come, and then in a blink of an eye it's over. Not only that, but a lot of us are taking what little vacation we have to head on an out-of-state trip or try to maximize our time with a 5 or 7 day hunt in the woods. And that's why it's so critical to be the most efficient and effective with all of your efforts during this very, very short time frame. So in this video, we're going to talk about our November trail camera checklists, our tips, strategies, and locations. So to cover the very basics of our trail camera tips, we're not going to talk on these points a lot, but make sure you cover the basics. Make sure you have power. Make sure your SD cards are working, are properly formatted, the proper size or capacity for what you're trying to do with that specific camera. And make sure the damn things are turned on and working when you leave that location. So let's cover some 4 basic tips for our November trail camera strategies. It's all going to relate to how you physically set your trail cameras up, what modes, what types of settings you're running. And one of the most important things in this time of the year is understanding and knowing how critical data points are, how fast deer are moving in and out of areas. And because of that, it's really important that you're running your cameras in the shortest trigger delay as possible. I don't know how many times, and you guys watching this video have probably seen the same thing. You have your camera set up on a bench or a travel corridor or some type of rut funnel, and you get a picture of a doe. She's running. You know she's being chased by a buck, yet the camera doesn't take a picture of anything. Maybe it's because your trigger delay is too long, maybe because your trigger speeds are too slow. But whatever the cause is, you want to take control of all those variables that you can control within your camera. So that's tip number 1. Run the shortest trigger delay as possible. So with your camera's trigger delay, it's going to be dependent on the physical model camera you're running. And a lot of guys are running cell cams this year. The craze has gone all through the industry, all through the marketplace. And those upload times and those trigger delays, the recovery times of these cameras, a lot of times it's going to be dependent on not only the camera model, but what kind of upload frequency or upload intervals that you're using. So this XS render, for example, in real time, the upload frequency is 15 seconds. So it has a recovery time of 15 seconds. Therefore, the trigger delay in real time cannot be any lower than 15 seconds. It might not be a bad idea to change that upload interval to maybe every 3 hours, or maybe, I don't know that I would run it every 24 or 6. I think the information is still time sensitive. But if you're running a 3-hour upload interval, a lot of times you can lower that trigger delay on the camera, like the XS render. You can run a 3-hour upload interval, so you're getting your pictures every 3 hours instead of real time, but you can run that trigger delay down to a second or 2. So again, looking at what the camera's capabilities are is going to be a big deal in how you actually go in and set those up. So keep that pro tip in mind. So tip number 2, if you're running your cameras in photo mode, you want to make sure you have them in a multi-shot burst. That's going to increase the odds of that same scenario playing out where a doe's being chased by a buck, and maybe your recovery time and trigger delay on your camera is, maybe it's the fastest it'll recover is 5 seconds. If you extend that burst count where you're taking multiple shots every time a trigger event happens, you're going to increase your odds of catching that chasing buck or that tailing buck bumping these does through these areas. Tip number 3, if your camera has the ability to run video, we highly, highly suggest running video in your trail cameras. Not only are you going to gather the attitude and personality and some physical traits about that buck, but you're just able to gain so much more information on how they're traveling. Are they seeking and chasing? Is the buck's tongue hanging out? Is he grunting? Is he cutting a hot doe, cutting a track of a hot doe, or is he just cruising? So if you have the ability to run video mode in your cameras, be sure you're running video mode. And with that, you want to make sure, again, going back to some of the basics, you want to make sure that you have sufficient SD card space or capacity on that specific camera. So with video mode, the length of the video is going to be ultra important as well. We have countless videos, 10, 12, 15 seconds, where the same scenario is playing out. A doe's being chased. We have a 10-second video of that doe, and then boom, the video cuts off. The camera goes in recovery, and we're yet yearning to see a video of that buck. So be cautious of how long you do that. I don't know that I would run a 3, 4, 5-minute video, but definitely check your settings in your camera and the camera's capability to see what the maximum video length is. And if you can run a 60-second video, 45-second video, even a 90-second video, it's going to be well worth your efforts. So tip number 4, this tip is probably going to be a little subjective. There's probably guys out there that are going to say, or disagree with us, say that they disagree with us. They might have the polar opposite opinion of what we're about to say. But we run a large number of cameras on all kinds of different properties. Between everybody at the office, we're well over 100 cameras. And we see a lot of missed opportunities. We see failure points, things we could do better. And typically that experience is why we're putting these videos out. So I want you to really think hard about what this next point is. And that is, during the rut, it's okay to check your cameras as frequently as you think is needed. If you're not running cellular cameras. Obviously if you're running cell cameras, that's not a worry. But one of the things that we find, regardless of kind of the property that we're running these cameras on, is that deer are moving in and out of these areas very, very quick. And they'll come into an area and hole up for maybe 2, 3, maybe 4 days, and then they're cruising onto the next doe bedding area, or onto through that next rut funnel, on to find their next doe. And we see the same thing happen with scrapes. Scrapes are hot for a few days, and all of a sudden, like clockwork, they'll shut off. So for us, it's ultra important that you're going in and checking your regular SD card trail cameras pretty damn frequent. In my mind, if I have cameras and I'm hunting in a specific area, I have nothing against going in and checking those cameras every single day, as long as I know that I'm not bumping the deer that I'm after. So again, take that thought into your mind and really try to wrap around your hunting context, your hunting property, your hunting situation, and see if it's applicable. And I think that the majority of people will really find that helpful. All right, so the next thing we want to get to are actual rut locations, or trail camera locations during the rut. And trail camera locations are going to change throughout the year, and even when you look at the specific time period of the rut and break down the phases, the seeking and chasing phase, the lockdown phase, the later phase of the rut, your camera tactics are probably going to change a little bit, kind of per each phase. And there's no secret that somewhere in America does are being bred on November 3rd, or October 31st, or November 7th. But generally speaking, that early part of November, the majority of bucks are going to be seeking and chasing, looking for that first doe. That middle portion of November, from the 12th kind of to the 18th or 20th, is going to be your peak lockdown phase, where the majority of bucks are either with their first doe or second doe, or maybe they're on their third. And then towards the end of the rut, the last 10 days of November, again, the majority of bucks are going to be looking and searching longer distances for the last hot doe, or last available doe to breed. So as we're going through those locations, keep those time frames or phases in mind on your specific property. So our number one location we'd like to run cameras on during the rut are rut funnels. And a lot of guys throw around the term funnel, pinch point, travel corridor, and they kind of use them interchangeably. But I think that's a big mistake, and I also think that it confuses a lot of people, even when they're just trying to communicate, or guys listening to a podcast or reading a blog or watching a video. They hear that term, and they're not putting context around that specific the specific time period or scenario in November. So when you're talking rut funnels, or funnels during the rut, you want to be able to relate that back to what the rut is, and it's all about breeding. It's all about does. So those rut funnels are going to, again, relate to does. So that could be a bench or some type of travel corridor between two doe bedding areas. It could be between bed and food. There's a lot of different scenarios there. And, a funnel in general is just going to be anything that concentrates deer movement. It could be as simple as a fallen tree, making deer wrap around, an uprooted stump or a deadfall. It could be a hole in a fence. It could be a bench. It could be a saddle in hill country. So there's a lot of different things that define that. But just remember, a rut funnel is something, topography, terrain. It's something that concentrates deer movement. And during the rut, it's going to be geared around bucks searching for does. The second location we want to talk about is pretty obvious. It's doe bedding. You hear guys talk about what's your rut strategy, downwind of doe bedding, downwind of doe bedding. And, hanging cameras in those types of areas, it's not any different. Doe bedding doesn't change a whole lot throughout the year. It's going to be close to some type of primary food source, a destination food source. Could be a food plot, could be ag if it's standing. It could be acorns. It could be a clear cut. whatever the most attractive food in that area is, a lot of times you're going to find doe bedding. And those camera locations are either going to be downwind of doe bedding, and or if you're in hill country, taking that thermal pull or thermal rise into consideration. So you may want to, in hill country, you may want to hang camera down below doe bedding for those thermal pulls in the evening, or maybe above that doe bedding in the mornings and afternoons when those thermals are rising. The third location we want to talk about, and is a really good way to monitor the rut and what phase that you're kind of in on that specific property, is scrapes near bedding. And the best way that we found to do that, if at all applicable, use a cell camera, real-time information, and you know exactly when a doe is coming in, working a scrape, when a buck is right behind her coming in, working a scrape. And when that scrape turns cold, that's when you know, hey, okay, the sign phase, that seeking and chasing phase, is maybe winding down a little bit. I need to focus my efforts onto doe bedding areas, or one of the other locations we're going to talk about a little bit later, kind of the isolation areas where bucks push does in to actually, lock them down and breed, kind of out of the way type stuff. But monitoring scrapes near doe bedding is a great way to gather real-time information and also keep tabs on what exactly is going on your property. The next location we want to talk about is this is a play from the Jeff Sturgis playbook, and it's going to be a water hole. We don't have a ton of experience with water holes, we're going to be completely honest, but we get so much information from Jeff and how he manipulates and manages his properties, not only his properties, but his hunting opportunities, his tree stands, his camera locations, and how all of that really syncs together. And when you consume some of Jeff's content, he's talking about water holes. And a lot of guys are talking about water holes and hunting water when it's the early season, when it's hot, deer going to those water sources. And Jeff's theory is a little bit different. Jeff's theory is more along the lines of a biologist, where those scientists and those folks know that bucks and deer in general, are getting more of their moisture content through the green vegetation that they're consuming in their daily diet, not necessarily going to a water puddle or a water hole or a pond to consume their water. I'm not saying that they won't do that, but again, speaking in generalities. However, when these bucks are out cruising and ranging, and they're traveling for maybe a mile or two in the morning, a mile or two in the afternoon, a mile or two in the evening, they're getting worn down, they're less focused on food, and in the fall, there's less green vegetation for them to eat and actually consume that moisture. So again, water holes is a playbook, or a play from the Jeff Sturgis playbook. We have some fantastic B-roll and content provided from Jeff to us, and he has some great videos on that. So if you want to learn more about water holes, go check out Jeff. So the next location we want to talk about is something that I mentioned earlier, and it is what we're going to call isolation areas. This stuff becomes a big deal when you're in big open ground, big rolling prairie. Maybe it's an area like Kansas, a lot of CRP, a lot of grasses, or even big ag, where there's just not a whole lot of structure or cover. And these isolation areas are things that we're going to focus our cellular cameras on. And what we're trying to accomplish here is catching bucks nosing does out to these isolated areas. Maybe it's an island of trees, maybe it's a fence row, maybe it's just a drainage or a ditch running through an ag field. But these bucks are going to push those does out into these areas to keep them away from other deer and not have the competition to breed that doe. They're going to be there for a couple days, and then that buck's going to move on after that doe's bred. So that real-time information, running cell cams on these isolation areas, becomes ultra important through that middle portion of November. So the last location we want to talk about are primary food sources. I think that most of us probably already have cameras in these primary food locations or food sources, and a lot of times in the earlier part of the rut, actually through all times of the rut, that you'll often find those does coming to food in the evening, and behind them in some short time frame, not too far away, is typically a buck trailing her, and maybe that deer maybe that buck's just keeping tabs on that doe, knowing that she's only maybe a couple days away, 2 days away, 24 hours away, and he wants to be there when she comes into estrus and allows him to breed. So a lot of times when these does are coming into these primary food sources in the evening time, you'll have bucks following. All right, so that's a wrap for our November trail camera checklist, tips, strategies, and locations. Guys, we want to be sure you guys are enjoying your time, making the most of your efforts through November. It comes and goes way too fast, and come January 1, we're all going to be thinking about, you know, daydreaming of rut sits and grunting giant bucks chasing does like crazy through the Midwest. So enjoy your time in the woods. If you guys find some value in this video, be sure to give us a thumbs up, leave us a comment, and smash that subscribe button for us.